Time now for Focus. I'm a practicing Muslim and he's a practicing Jew. We are here and we get on. The view of a Muslim man in the southern French city of Toulon, which, like the rest of the country, has seen a rise in anti-Muslim incidents since the terror attacks in January. France 24 sent a team to Toulon to report on local efforts to combat Islamophobia.
You know, we're not Charlie. Why? Because we don't agree with it.
At this local council estate in Toulon, southern France, Muslims and non-Muslims share similar concerns. Over 100 Islamophobic incidents have been reported here in the past 2 months. Inhabitants of this working-class area have been fighting against anti-Islam prejudice since the attacks on Paris at the start of the year.
When they talk about the youth of the estates, there's already an ambiguity. When they say it like that, how does that get interpreted? Are they talking about black market traders, the bearded ones, the violent ones? They're all lumped in together.
Murad and his friends refuse to be labeled. They say they're always fighting against the negative image that people sometimes have of them. They're keen to show that Jews and Muslims live peacefully side by side in this council estate.
You come out here, you walk about, and everyone respects you.
You've got to say it loudly, and then there won't be any stigmatization. If you don't say anything, sure, you'll get stigmatized. You have to shout it.
It's a problem with the choice of words.
We have to be able to break this barrier through talking, but especially through education of our children. Learn the Quran, learn the Torah, and see what unites us.
He shows us that he's not afraid of us, so he comes up to us. It proves that we can live together with respect and tolerance. I'm a practicing Muslim and he's a practicing Jew. Look, we're here and we get on.
According to the CFCM, the French Council of the Muslim Faith, there are 5 million Muslims in France. In this mosque, worshippers say they feel like they have to keep a low profile in their daily lives out of fear of prejudice.
We try to have the appropriate reaction to the situation. A Muslim should always make sure they're in the right. Yes, we have concerns, and people see us in a bad light. Sometimes they say things to us.
The Council Against Islamophobia in France goes further. It says there is outright hostility towards Muslims and that the notion of Islamophobia is not even recognized in French law.
We see a lot of convictions for statements that are factually Islamophobic, but in a legal sense, they can be seen to incite racial hatred. So it's only under this term that Islamophobia can be prosecuted and punished.
Some believe that the Muslim community itself must openly speak out in public against extremism. This is currently the debate at this Toulon Women's Association.
I think that if we want to avoid prejudice, it has to be the Muslims themselves working on it. That's to say, they must rise up against extremism and do so openly.
Sorry, but with everything that we're hearing on TV, with all these great thinkers, all these people with education, knowledge, understanding, even with all these people talking about it, we have to go even further?
With emotions running high across the country following January's attacks, the French government has decided to tackle the problem head-on. Interior Minister Bernard Cazeneuve has launched a program focused on Islam in France. He's opened a so-called forum for dialogue, hoping to represent the diversity of French Muslims.
And joining me now in the studio is Nassira Ghanif, a sociologist and university professor here in Paris. Hello, thanks very much for coming in. Now, France has experienced a rise in anti-Muslim attacks since the terror attacks in January, but Islamophobia isn't anything new here. Do you think the government has been slow to react, to really address this problem?
They have been reluctant from the very beginning to address this problem. The phenomenon raised in the early 2000s, and since then there has been some strong reluctance among the politicians, especially, to even word the phenomenon, to use the name Islamophobia.
Why is that?
Because I think it goes back to the colonial history that has to do with the way Muslims were under the colonial rule. And facing the fact that now Muslims are equal citizens in post-colonial France is something that is hard to undertake, to acknowledge, and to push further with the consequences that it implies for the French society at large.
Does that have anything to do with secularism? Has that actually hindered progress on the debate?
Yeah, what is interesting is that during the colonial rule, secularism was not including colonial subjects. So Muslims were not concerned whatsoever by citizenship, equality, and the secularism that was implemented since 1905. And now we are facing the fact that Muslims are part of the secularism reality of post-colonial France. So, of course, having this religion as an obvious change for the French society, and having to deal and to address many questions that are raised by Muslims, not as Muslims, but as people who are not allowed to claim equal rights as other French citizens, is something that the political personnel and the state has a hard time to address and face.
And it's not just Muslims who feel threatened here in France. I mean, there have long been complaints, so to speak, from the Jewish community. They say they've been discriminated against.
Yeah, and interestingly, the Jews are part of this kind of a hatred politics that France has implemented for centuries. And now we are facing a new kind of conundrum in which Jews are supposed to be only hated by Muslims, and they are supposed to be the only ones who express any kind of anti-Semitism. But we are blaming the very ones that are facing Islamophobia at the same time. So there is some sort of a dead end to this kind of public discourse about pitting Jews and Muslims one against the other.
So what should the government do?
We should get out of that. Yeah.
What can it do to get out of that?
Well, first they should give up the discourse about not naming the reality and the phenomenons that have led to the rise, if not the skyrocketing of racism in France, which is Islamophobia, and the way anti-Semitism is being fueled by Islamophobia, not because just Muslims would be the only ones who express hatred against the Jews, but also the fact that if you are unable to express anti-Semitism now in France, you can still express very easily and comfortably Islamophobia, which is exactly what is happening. So facing this phenomenon would help maybe undo a lot of the conditions under which racism has become some sort of a trivial expression in today's France.
And the term Islamofascism used by Prime Minister Manuel Valls, that doesn't really help, does it?
No, and it shows a deep inconsistency in the way the French minister, the French Prime Minister, is facing the reality. He's on the one hand serving some sort of a public discourse about Islamofascism, and on the other hand he wants to help reform the French Islamic community, which, by the way, does not exist as it is described. There's no unified French community, Muslim community, and so he's pitting again one against the other. I mean, he's playing a very tough game that is a very dangerous game, based on this notion of a politics of fear that he wants to increase in some ways. And I find that very problematic when it comes to a political responsibility that he has to undertake.
And what's your reaction when you hear, like the woman in our report who says, well, it's up to the Muslim community, even if there isn't such a defined community, like you say, to address the problem of extremism?
Well, she put it very, very accurately by saying, how further can we go? What else do we have to do? I mean, the French Muslims in France always have to express some sort of distancing from whatever happens in France or in the world related to Islam, and they always have to face some sort of a suspicion that they have to to address in some way or another. And I understand this woman when she says there isn't more that we can do. We are loyal citizens and we are doing our job. We are doing whatever is expected from us. And the suspicion should just be released. I mean, there's no issue to put them under such pressure.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for your time, Nasira Ghanif. We appreciate you coming in for Focus today.